Good afternoon. Thanks everyone so much for joining us for a webinar this evening. Get Educated on Social Security, hosted by AARP and NRTA, AARP's educator community. Just a couple seconds to go over our agenda so everyone knows what to expect. First, we'll cover logistics. So we'll do a welcome for all the educators and their friends and families on this webinar. We'll talk a little bit about why Social Security matters for educators. We'll give an in-depth update from Washington, D.C. on what's going on with Social Security. We'll do a review of two new research reports and data related to Social Security, which I know will be of interest to everyone. We will take your questions and then we'll share some resources. And of course, we'll do a closing thank you to the educators with us today. Just in terms of logistics, we have everyone in listen-only mode, only so it keeps out that background noise. We are recording this session and we will send you a replay link to this. And we also will post it on NRTA's Facebook and YouTube account, so you could watch it at your leisure, or you can share it with others too who might be interested in this webinar. Following the presentation, we're going to take your questions. And then with just one other point, when you registered for this email, you went through the AARP email system. Just make sure that you confirm your email with AARP. That way we can be sure to stay in touch with you and send you follow-up information or other information that you might be interested in. On this slide here, you'll see there's a confirmation email that you might have received. So just click on that red button to confirm your email, and then you'll receive a follow-up email confirming that you've confirmed your email. And with that, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Al Campos. Al is the director for NRTA AARP's educator community. Al, it's all yours.
Thank you so much, Kelly. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Al Campos, Director of NRTA, and I can't tell you how delighted we are to have so many of you joining us today. We've got nearly 1,000 educators on this national webinar, an incredible turnout. We know Social Security is deeply important to you. Our research shows that 60% of educators are worried about Social Security, which is exactly why we're hosting this session today, to inform, empower, and engage you. If you're new to NRTA, we're one of the nation's largest education-based organizations. We work with a national network of about 850,000 educators throughout the nation. Through programs like this one, we help educators champion their financial security and health through advocacy, collaboration, information, and volunteer engagement. A bit of history. Did you know that AARP was founded by an educator? Dr. Ethel Percy Andrews, a retired California high school principal, founded NRTA back in 1947, which eventually evolved into AARP. So our roots with educators run very deep. Now I'm thrilled to introduce a super lineup of speakers for you today. First, we have John Hishta, AARP Senior Vice President, who leads our national campaign work. Elisa Walker, Director of AARP's Government Affairs Department, who works directly with policymakers every day on Capitol Hill. Joe Eskovitz, Senior Director for Social Security and Savings at AARP's Public Policy Institute, and is a former Capitol Hill staffer. Tyler Bond, Research Director at the National Institute of Retirement Security, and one of AARP's key research partners, and with a long history with NRTA as well, providing vital research. Both Joel and Tyler will be sharing new Social Security research and insights with you today. And with that, let's get started. John, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Al, and I'm delighted to be with everybody today and excited about spending the next hour with you all talking about probably one of the most important issues that our country faces, not only today, but also into the future as well. I wanted to go through some specific statistics about Social Security and why it matters so much first. But as I lead into that, I always like to say whenever I'm doing these talks that I really believe that Social Security is the most important government institution that has ever been created in the 20th century into the 21st century. It really truly is an American institution. And it's a sacred promise that the government has made to everybody who has paid into the program over the years during their working lives. Just for everybody's context, there are 69 million Americans currently on Social Security, and that number is going to grow to over 80 million, upwards of 82 million in the next 10 years. Social Security literally lifts more than 16 million seniors out of poverty every year. I can't stress that enough. It literally lifts 16 million seniors out of poverty every year, and any cuts to Social Security would see millions of people's livelihoods threatened. As I said, it's a sacred promise. We've earned it. People pay into Social Security their entire working lives, and it has helped generation upon generation of Americans, including educators across this country, stay out of poverty and live with dignity after a lifetime of hard work so that they're able to pay their bills, live in their own homes, and age with dignity. And it's something we all rely on, plan on, and realize is absolutely necessary when it comes to our retirement. So now let's just talk about some of the key facts associated with Social Security as well. It has never missed a payment in over 90 years of existence. Let me repeat that. We just had the 90th anniversary of Social Security, and it has never missed a payment. Today, there are more than 69 million Americans on it, as I said, and there are over 183 million folks who pay into it as workers right now to help the program. 40% of older Americans rely on Social Security literally for the majority of their income, and it provides almost the entire amount of income for 15% of the households who are retired. We did a lot of research this year around the 90th anniversary, and probably one of the most important findings that we saw was that 95% of the people told us they considered Social Security extremely important. And this holds true across all demographics, all political lines, where everybody sits. And so it is extremely important, not just for today, but for the future. And we know while Social Security does face a funding shortfall by around 2034, it can still continue to pay 80% of the benefits after that. However, 80% is not enough, and Congress can and should fix it before that 2034 deadline comes to pass. Just a few things I want to touch on in terms of how AARP is engaged with and helping to champion Social Security over this past year and into the future. Earlier this year, there was some serious conversations about some problems with customer service at the Social Security Administration, and we worked hard and diligently by alerting members of Congress and talking to the administration and making sure that folks understood that a service was important, and it was too much for people to wait too long when they made their phone calls to Social Security. They wanted to get their questions answered, not only appropriately, but also on time. And so we've been demanding better customer service throughout the year. And we know how important that is, particularly with folks who are just getting on Social Security and need some answers. In the meantime, we're fighting to make sure, and have fought to make sure, that more of your Social Security income goes back into your pocket. One of the new changes in the laws, which will become into effect next year, is a larger deduction for those on Social Security, which will see, for those under a certain income level, a reduction in the taxes or an elimination of the taxes they actually pay on their Social Security benefits. And in the meantime, we're calling on Congress, and we'll continue to call on Congress and the President to come up with some bipartisan solutions to make sure that the Social Security is around, not just for this generation, but for future generations as we move forward. And we will continue to ask you all to help us in this endeavor. Join our fight, because we've all learned it, and we all need to be part of an effort to make sure that this important program is around for future generations to come. And with that, Kelly, I am going to turn it back over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, John. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen for just a moment here, and we are going to ask you all a question and take a poll. So let me just pull up my polling quiz. So we're going to ask you a question about what your concerns are about. Actually, we're going to ask you how important Social Security is to you. So let me just launch that poll. And then you should see on your screen the question and you can answer it. So the question is, how important is or will Social Security be to you and or your household's financial security in retirement? So if you want to just respond to that poll and let us know what you think, that would be great. Is it very important, somewhat important, or not important at all? Just let us know. We'll give you just a second there and you can register your vote. Okay, thank you so much for doing that. And let's just see what we get. So it looks like 50% of you said it would be very important. Another 40% said that it would be somewhat important, and only 10% said it would not be important. So let's close that poll out. And I'm going to go back and share my screen again. Let's see, and pick up where we left off. Okay, so now we'll turn it over to Elisa Walker, who handles Social Security in the Government Affairs Department with AARP. Thanks, Elisa. It's all yours.
All right. Hi, Kelly. Thanks so much, and good afternoon, everyone. I am really excited to be here with you to get to share some updates on what we're seeing and hearing in Washington, D.C. when it comes to Social Security. So first of all, as John alluded to a little bit, this year we've been celebrating Social Security's 90th anniversary because for 90 years, Social Security has been really transforming retirement and aging. It's lifted millions out of poverty, and as we heard, it's never missed a payment. So we held more than 600 events all around the country to celebrate this legacy, looking backwards at the history, but also looking forwards at Social Security's ongoing importance. So the pictures here are just a couple of little snippets of some of the events that we held all around the country. And I imagine that some of you listening may have participated in some of those events. So thank you for that. And so, looking forward and looking at today, Social Security is the foundation of economic security for seniors, but also for people with disabilities and people who've lost a family breadwinner. And so we know that everyone is paying close attention to Social Security this week and last week because the cost of living adjustment was hot off the presses last Friday morning. And so for the coming year, the increase will be 2.8%. And that is based on inflation data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And what it means in real terms for people receiving Social Security, the average benefit for a retired worker will increase by about $56. Obviously, the amount that any one of you receives will depend on your exact benefit amount, but a 2.8% increase. Now, I probably don't have to convince all of you just how important the COLA is. I know I'm probably preaching to the choir here, but I will just say that for most people, Social Security is often the only source of inflation-protected income in retirement. Because if you have, other sources of income, retirement savings and things like that, those types of income usually lose purchasing power as costs rise. But Social Security payments automatically adjust through the annual COLA to help make sure that seniors can keep up with the rising cost of living. An interesting little historical note here, in the early 1970s, AARP was a key voice in fighting to create the COLAs, to make them automatic each year. And more recently, we've also fought back against proposals to reduce the COLA because we know that for our members, it already isn't enough. In fact, we asked our members recently what they thought of this COLA, based on the inflation they're experiencing. And 3 out of 4 Americans ages 50 and older say that a COLA of right around 3% is not enough to keep up with rising prices. At the same time, we know it's really important that we have the COLA and we can celebrate the value, the stability that provides to older Americans. because otherwise we know folks would be falling behind every year as prices rise. So with this 2.8% COLA, it will take effect with December benefits paid out in January. And just one last note on the COLA, SSA has emphasized that beneficiaries can use their online accounts, which they call a My Social Security account. You can use that to find out your personalized benefit increase up to 3 weeks earlier than when you'll receive the notice of that by mail in December. So something to keep in mind going forward. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. And another hot topic lately, we always get lots of questions about how the shutdown affects Social Security. And the most important thing to know here is that Social Security payments continue with no interruptions. And that is because Social Security is what's known as mandatory spending, which means that it has its own dedicated funding source, primarily the payroll taxes that workers and employers pay. So Social Security's funding for benefits is unaffected by the government shutdown. Most of SSA's, the agency's services also continue because they're necessary to pay those benefits. So you can still apply for benefits or, update your information with SSA. There are a few smaller things that you cannot do during the shutdown, like verifying your benefit income in person at a field office, although you can still do that online. And if the shutdown continues even further than it already has, it's possible we could start seeing delays in the agency's customer service. But again, the benefit payments will not be interrupted, will not be delayed. So let me turn next to SSA customer service a little bit more broadly, sort of zooming out here. For many years, SSA has been serving more and more customers, including the baby boomers as they've been retiring, while being chronically underfunded and understaffed. And so at AARP, we have long been fighting for adequate funding for the agency because it's just not possible for them to keep doing more with less. Like many other federal agencies, SSA has been dealing with some rather large staffing losses in some areas. Nationally, SSA's staffing dropped from around 57,000 at the start of the year, which was already a 50-year low, and it dropped to about 51,000 currently, and they're planning to further reduce that to 50,000 by the end of the year. And we know, when we talk to AARP members around the country, these staffing losses are not an abstraction. They're very tangible and very real because they're playing out in SSA's field offices all around the country. Almost a third of the field offices lost more than 10% of their staff over the 12 months ending in March, and they've almost certainly lost more since then. And technology can help close the gap to some extent, but we know that not everyone is comfortable doing business with SSA online. And so we've also been monitoring widespread reports of long wait times when people call in by phone to get service. As of August, half of all callers were waiting 2 hours or more to get an answer by phone. There's sometimes also long delays to get an appointment to go in person to a field office. Again, as of August, there was on average a 35-day wait to get those field office appointments. And people who are applying for disability benefits also face long wait times to get a decision on their application. On average, 7 months to get an initial decision, and even longer if people need to appeal after that. So we know these are really significant challenges for seniors and for older adults around the country. And I'll come back to phone service for a second to mention, I wanted to elaborate on what John mentioned earlier about how twice this year, SSA proposed and then walked back plans to create some new restrictions on phone service. They were proposing to require callers to either verify their identity online or have to go in person to a field office. And so both times we at AARP raised concerns that those restrictions would have forced millions of seniors to travel in person to field offices in order to do, to apply for benefits or do really basic tasks that you can currently do by phone. So we pushed back, and many of you reached out to your members of Congress as well. We sent over 2 million emails. And both times we were grateful that SSA ultimately did listen to the concerns of older Americans, and they reversed course. So we are continuing to fight for SSA to uphold its commitment to meet people where they are, whether that's online, by phone, or in person. And right now we have a relatively new SSA commissioner as of late spring. And so we're working with SSA to try to ensure that everyone can get timely and accurate services, prompt answers to their questions, because that's the least that America's seniors deserve. So far I've been talking about the current state of play on Social Security, but I also want to address its future because we know you have a lot of questions. And what I like to say is right now, the most important thing is to make sure that Congress knows just how important Social Security is to Americans all across the country. In other words, for all of you. So we are here in DC sharing that message every day, but we know it's so important that they hear that message directly as well. And when we get these questions about Social Security's future, I often think it's helpful to just kind of pause and take a step back. We just finished celebrating Social Security's 90th anniversary because for 90 years it hasn't missed a check. And that is really a remarkable track record of success. And so fundamentally, it's a good program. It does face some challenges, which I'll get to next. But at the same time, it largely works well. So let's talk about Social Security's funding. Social Security funds benefit payments from essentially a combination of two things: new revenues that it has coming in, and from the money that it has already saved in its trust funds. So I'm going to talk about each of those in turn, starting with the ongoing revenues. And I mentioned earlier that Social Security has its own permanent dedicated funding source, which is the payroll tax. You might know this as FICA. That's usually what it says when you get your paycheck. Workers pay in 6.2% of their earnings up to a cap, and their employers match it. There are a few other smaller income sources, but this payroll tax is really the main one. And the money coming in is used to pay the benefits that are due each year. And then when there's extra, by law, it's saved in Social Security's trust funds. And if you're wondering what that means, what the trust funds are, you can basically think of it as it's like Social Security's savings account. By law, the trust fund reserves, which is to say the money in those savings accounts, if you will, those funds are invested in U.S. Treasury securities, which means that they're backed by the full faith and credit of the U.S. government. And as a result, Treasury securities are widely considered to be the safest investment in the world. And currently, the trust funds have $2.7 trillion because since 1984, Social Security was for many years running annual surpluses. And so that surplus each year, whatever's not needed to pay benefits right away, that's saved in the trust funds. But in recent years, Social Security has been running a little bit short each year, meaning its annual income isn't quite enough to pay all of the benefits due that year. So when that happens, it draws on the trust fund reserves to pay the rest of the benefits due. And if this continues, the latest projection is that in 2034, Social Security's trust funds would become depleted. So what happens in 2034? Next slide, please. So in 2034, for starters, John mentioned this earlier, and I was so glad he did because it's such an important point. Even if nothing changes before then, in 2034, 81% of Social Security benefits would still be payable because of the ongoing income that Social Security has from payroll taxes. So in other words, as long as there are workers working and paying into Social Security isn't going anywhere. But if nothing's done before then, beneficiaries could face an automatic across-the-board benefit cut of roughly 20%. And we know seniors can't afford that. So obviously no one wants that to happen. And there are a lot of policy options available, which we'll come back to. But it's also a far cry from the idea that we often hear of Social Security going broke in 2034. That is not the case. There's a manageable funding shortfall of 20%. And I want to emphasize here that this entire question of the shortfall and trust fund depletion, all of that arises because Social Security by law cannot borrow and can't spend money that it doesn't have. So in other words, it is not a driver of the debt, and it's not borrowing money from the rest of government. So taking a step back here, what this all means is that we need to close a roughly 20% funding gap. And that is a challenge for sure. But as I said, it's really not the fundamental crisis that it's often made out to be. And the good news is that Congress has never before let Social Security get to the point of trust fund depletion without taking action first. And it's also a manageable challenge. There are plenty of policy options to address it. So this is not an unsolvable problem. In fact, mathematically, it's pretty easy. The challenge is more so in the political will. Now, the policy options here generally fall into 2 to 3 big levers. Within Social Security, you can either raise revenues or reduce benefits, or you can look outside of Social Security for other kinds of funding. And I know our next panel will get more into this. Before I turn it over to them, I just wanted to add, it's not an accident that myths about Social Security's solvency are so widespread. Social Security's opponents have spent decades making sure that people, and especially younger people, think that Social Security won't be there for them. But I actually see a lot of reason for optimism about Social Security's future because, as we've been saying, this program has been around for 90 years. It's been through a number of challenges over that time and, a lot of changes, and it has stayed strong throughout. And so if we're looking ahead 10 years to 2034, 2035, looking ahead 20 years or even the next 90 years, I think we'll see that Social Security will absolutely still be there, and it will still be the foundation of economic security for Americans. So I'm going to wrap up there, and for more on our Social Security work, you can check out the 2 links that we have on the next slide. The first one goes to our main Social Security resources page, which you can also get to at aarp.org/social security. And that page is kind of like it's our main hub on Social Security resources. You can find all kinds of info and articles there, from the most basic information about benefits to an Ask the Experts section and everything in between. And then the second link here goes to an action page where you can send a message to your member of Congress about protecting and strengthening Social Security. And with that, Kelly, I think I will turn it back to you.
Great, thanks so much. And just for those of you who may not be familiar with those QR codes, I know we all got much more familiar with QR codes during the pandemic, using them in restaurants and everything. But just take your iPhone and put it on the camera, and it'll scan that QR code, and it should direct you straight to that web page. So we have a couple more QR codes that we'll share with you as well. So thank you so much, Elisa. And before we get to our next speaker, we're going to try to do one more poll for all of you. So I'm going to stop sharing my presentation for just a second, and we're going to launch our second poll. Let's see, let me get that to come up. Okay, our next poll is going to ask concerns about Social Security. We know from our engagement with folks across the country that people have concerns. So we're going to ask you what your biggest concern is about Social Security today. So as you can see here on the poll, the first question is, What is your biggest concern about Social Security? Long-term funding solvency, customer service, cost of living adjustments, or other? So if you want to just take a second there and let us know what your top concern is, we'll share the results with you. So again, the choices are long-term funding and solvency, customer service, and cost of living, or some other concern. So just pick which one of those is the biggest concern for you. Great. Okay, so it looks like the highest concern is the long-term funding solvency, which isn't surprising. That's been in the news quite a bit. So we will go back to our slide presentation, and you should be able to see that again. Okay, so now we're going to turn to research about Social Security that we thought that would be of interest to you all. And first up will be Joel Eskovitz, and he's going to talk to you about one report that AARP worked on. Joel, it's all yours.
Great, thanks, Kelly. And the poll answer, I think, is a good place to start off here, because this is an area where we have been doing a lot of work. And earlier this year, in conjunction with NERS and the Chamber of Commerce, as well as the National Academy of Social Insurance, we released the findings of a very in-depth survey. And if you move to the next slide, I'll give you a little bit of the background of the survey. But what we were essentially asking people to do, so this was an online service, we did what's called conjoint analysis, which is a technical speak for a trade-off. Basically, we gave people a series of options across about 8 categories. COLA, tax options, benefit cuts, benefit enhancements, and we had people kind of pick the packages that they liked, and from that, instead of giving them 1,000 different options, you're able to discern from about a dozen different questions what people's preferences are in terms of reforming the program. And I will say, I'm going to stick to the optimistic theme that Elisa started. There is a tremendous amount of agreement here. In fact, if you would be surprised to look at this, because we are led to believe that on every issue Americans are divided. Well, not on this one. It's very clear where Americans stand. Now, is that opinion shared on Capitol Hill? Perhaps not, but this hopefully will lead people to think or rethink, their approaches to modernizing and updating the program, which will need to happen within the next decade in order to make sure that everyone gets their benefit payments in full. So if we move on to the next slide, we did ask some kind of basic questions. I'll just move through these ones fairly quickly because I think we've highlighted this already, but it is striking to me how few people find no importance in Social Security. And this is across, all demographic groups, all income groups. And only, really 2% didn't find it important in any kind of a way. Most people, rely on it for some, most, or all of their income in retirement. And on the next slide, we also asked about what would happen if you didn't have it. And 2/3 said that they wouldn't be able to afford the basics, or would have to make significant sacrifices. So again, even in the high income category, the loss of Social Security income would be impactful, and certainly, just goes to show that this is a universal program, and one that supports Americans of all different income levels and all different, races and ethnicities and all of that. On to the next slide. So what we asked people to do, again, as I said, it was a trade-off package. And so these are the 5, 6, 7, 8. I said 8. I think that's 9 actually. Categories that we asked questions within. The top 3 are really this is an order of importance. Basically, if this was included in a package, you would be more likely to support the package. So we asked people around a variety of different options on what's called the tax max, which is the cap beyond which you don't pay Social Security payroll taxes, and that is moving up to about 185,000 next year. But basically, and at the time it was asked, is 168. So it goes up every year along with the COLA. But we dove deeper into this, and the cap option that people liked the best was keeping the cap where it is, and basically having a new tax on workers earning above 400,000. Eventually, over time, as I said, the cap increases. Eventually, there would be no cap under this approach. The other big question within that category is, do people that pay more in get more back? The folks that took this survey said, no. I mean, we were giving people the cost and savings of all of this. So it obviously costs less money to not provide additional benefits to the folks that are paying more in. But interestingly, the second most important piece of any package to Americans was not just that rich people pay more. They're happy to pay more. All Americans that work and pay into the system, they would happily pay an extra 1 percentage point more in order to get the same level of benefits. And then the third, and like I said, these top three are universal across every possible breakdown. People were not excited to raise the retirement age beyond 67. There was a little bit of support for 68, and 69 was way too far. So that was really, those were the top three things that most Americans agreed on. Additional things that we asked about include, having a COLA that reflects more older American spending patterns, a caregiver credit for folks that drop out of work to care for relatives. In this case, we just asked about children under 6 because we were using real proposals that have been made and have been scored. So that's why ideally we would love to see a benefit, if there was such a benefit implemented, that also allowed for caregiving for older relatives. That we asked about a new just across the board increase in benefits. People were not interested in that. They weren't interested in changing taxation of benefits, as you may know, though the taxation of benefits has remained since the One Big Beautiful Bill. There's a new tax credit that can offset some of the tax that some Americans pay. Not everyone pays taxes on benefits. It's only for certain middle and upper income people. We also asked about a bridge benefit that helps out people that are doing physically demanding work, and basically not penalizing them quite as much if they're not able to make it to the 67. And then the final thing, which was literally a coin flip, and I think more people included it than not, because it saved a little bit of money. But this was a kind of a form of means testing. But again, it was not significant in terms of, it's the lowest thing on the list. And so moving forward, just to recap, these are the characteristics of any package. Again, the package that I just showed, 82% of Americans preferred that to the status quo, which is in essence a 19% benefit cut in 2034. So again, the payroll tax on higher earners, and keeping the age where it is. But the things that decreased appeal was not touching that cap. A lot of people feel like that cap, which has been in the program since its inception, but largely the wage growth in the recent 30 years or so has been greater above the cap. So we've missed a lot of income for the program because we're not taxing people who have made money above, that 168 was when we asked that. Also, the other form of measurement for the COLA that most of the other government programs now use is called the chain CPI. You may remember during the Obama administration, this was something that was pushed for. We, AARP, pushed against that. We thought that over time that would really diminish American spending power. Again, the free 250 that was included in a bill, I think from Senator Sanders, people were not interested in that. And certainly, obviously, raising the age 2 years was a real non-starter. So that was, we really find this data to be very helpful because we walk people through all of the different options and what each change can do to the program. And finally, the other piece of this that was really interesting, which we've never asked about before, is on the next slide. It talks about, well, what do we do in 2034 if we still, Congress hasn't done anything, or they've done something, but it hasn't kicked in fast enough? Should we take money and reroute it from some other program? And the 2/3 of the folks said sure, and only 1 in 8 said no, that would be a bad idea. Interestingly, we delved deeper into that with another question, where we asked them essentially, well, how do you? If that's on the next slide, it's how do you want to deal with that rerouting or borrowing? And so again, this really shows clearly, and if you take nothing else away, the benefit being cut by about 20%, only 9% of the people supported that. I think in any way we ask that question, there's nowhere where more than 15% of the people wanted benefits to be cut in any meaningful way, especially across the board. I think most Americans, again, value the program. But what's interesting here is that fully half of the people would reroute the funds and just and let it be. Another quarter said, yeah, but there should be some repayment of that money that is borrowed or rerouted. But this is increasingly, as Elisa alluded to, we've often talked about, either cutting benefits or raising taxes as kind of the binary choice. Given how close we are now, certainly on the benefit side, it would be very challenging to implement a change there that would have any meaningful impact on the insolvency date. And even on the tax side, you would really have to raise taxes pretty aggressively and quickly in order to push that 2034 date back significantly. I mean, you could raise I'll leave it there. And so that it will also be something I think that will inevitably be part of the conversation, and as mainly as a stopgap. I don't think most people want. One of the beauties of Social Security is that it is self-financed and separate from the budget process, and that's why your benefits are go out, and we never have any concern about that, even during a government shutdown. And so, the idea of using government funds, long term is probably not wise, but as a stopgap until changes kick in, it does appear to have the support of the majority of the American people. But as I said, this is not an issue where Americans are divided, and it's fascinating to look across all categories. Most people value this program and will pay more to get the same, to keep the program running without cuts. And I think that is it.
Thank you, Joel.
And-
Then Joel has a couple pages you can also scan these QR codes. Just take your phone. You can scan those QR codes, and you can go to the Public Policy Institute's Work and Finance General page. And then the second QR code will take you to an article on the AARP website about this specific report, and then it links to the report. So you can access that information there. And then thank you again, Joel. And next up, we have Tyler Bond. He is the research director with the National Institute on Retirement Security, and NERS has a new report that I think you're all going to love. So I'm going to turn it over to Tyler to talk to you about that report.
Great. Thanks, Kelly. And thank you all for joining us today for this really important webinar. So I want to start by thanking AARP for their support of this research. This report's going to be publicly released tomorrow, so you all are getting a little bit of a sneak preview of this research. So what we wanted to do was to look at the economic impact of the spending of pension benefits. We all know that Social Security benefits are really important to the beneficiaries and their families. But what's often not acknowledged is the importance that Social Security has in the broader American economy. And so we wanted to do some research to see, what do the numbers say in terms of how much economic output is generated by the spending of Social Security benefits, how many jobs are supported, and really look at some of these other measures. So if you remember nothing else from what I'm going to say here in the next 5 minutes, just remember that every dollar of Social Security benefits that's spent in the US economy generates $2 of economic activity. So it's a 2-for-1 impact from the spending of Social Security benefits. So on the next slide, so this is really just sort of laying out, what are we talking about here in terms of the scope of the program. So the research that we did used data from 2023, where more than $1.4 trillion in Social Security benefits were paid to over 67 million beneficiaries. And while by far the largest number of beneficiaries are those receiving a retirement benefit, Social Security is also critically important for surviving spouses and children, and for Americans with disabilities who receive disability insurance from Social Security. So just using this as a baseline for how much we're talking about in terms of dollars, then on the next slide, we start to see what is some of the impact. So the spending of Social Security benefits in 2023 supported more than 12 million jobs across the US, and combined, those 12 million jobs paid more than $804 billion in labor income to the workers doing these jobs throughout our economy in all 50 states and Washington, D.C. Altogether, this economic activity contributed more than $1.5 trillion in value added, also known as GDP, to the US economy, for a total of more than 2.6 trillion in total economic output. So this is a very substantial amount of economic activity that Social Security helps support when Social Security's beneficiaries go out in the local economy and they buy food, they buy gas, they buy medicine, they make other purchases that then cycle through the economy and have impacts in other sectors. And it's important to keep in mind, it's been said a couple of times today that Social Security has never missed a benefit payment in over 90 years. And it's important to say in that context that Social Security is counter-cyclical, right? These benefits continue to be paid even when the economy as a whole might be experiencing a downturn. Those Social Security benefit checks are not missed. And so the beneficiaries are able to continue to spend and able to continue to prop up the economy, even when the economy might be experiencing weaknesses in other areas. And I think that's really important to acknowledge in this discussion. So then on the next slide, we wanted to think about what would happen in this scenario if 10 years from now, we had an automatic across the board benefit cut. Clearly that would have a very harmful impact on the beneficiaries themselves, as Elisa mentioned. But because of this research that we've done, we also know that it would have an impact on the economy. So rather than trying to speculate on what the economy might be like a decade from now, we just said, okay, what if benefits had been reduced by 19% in 2023, the same year that we analyzed in the report? And basically, we found that a 19% reduction in Social Security benefits would reduce the economic output the economic impact by 16.5%. So it would be, 2 million fewer jobs supported, less GDP added to the economy, and a lower total level of economic output. And so we wanted to frame this up to give people a bit of a sense of what we might be talking about if these automatic across-the-board benefit cuts were to occur. And then on the next slide, we also looked at these numbers for all 50 states and Washington, D.C. So throughout the report, we have tables like the two tables we have here that show the impact in each state in terms of number of jobs supported, labor income paid to those workers, GDP within each state. And then on the next slide, what you see is an example of the state fact sheets that we created. So these states are for, again, all 50 states and Washington, D.C. The fact sheets provide the state-specific numbers laid out on these 2 pages. You can see the example from Indiana here. And these fact sheets are available right now on the NRTA's website. And I think they're a very useful tool. We also summarize just sort of the basic information about Social Security benefits paid in each state in 2023, which I think is also a helpful reference for policymakers and other stakeholders who you might be meeting with. So the next slide then has another one of the QR codes that takes you to the NRTA's website where you can access both the main report and all of the state-specific fact sheets.
Thank you, Tyler. So now we're going to move on to the Q&A portion of the webinar. You should have a little question box on your computer that you can see, and we did receive some questions in advance from folks, so we'll read a couple of those. And if you have other questions, just share those with us, and then we can read them aloud. We'll take as many as we can, but we only have a couple minutes. But if we don't get to your questions, feel free to send an email, or you can post something on our Facebook page, or any way you want to reach out to us. If you do have questions, we want to make sure that your questions get answered if we don't have enough time on that. So let's see, let me go into the question box. Okay, here's a good one, and this one's related to educators, and it might be a good one for Elisa. Can you explain how Social Security works if I'm retired but go take a part-time job? Say if I am a teacher and I'm a substitute teacher, how does Social Security work in that regard?
That is a great question. We get that often about working while receiving benefits. And the short answer is you can work while receiving retirement benefits from Social Security. Depending on your age and how much you're earning, that can make a difference here. So once you reach your full retirement age, which is 67 for everybody born in 1960 and later, once you reach that age, you can work as much as you want and earn as much as you want, and it doesn't affect your Social Security at all. But if you've started collecting Social Security before your full retirement age and you're still working, or maybe you go back to work after, retiring from your main job, Social Security has something called the retirement earnings test that determines whether your benefits should be reduced. So the amounts go up a little bit each year, but this year, as an example, you can earn up to $23,400 with no effect on your Social Security. Once you earn more than that amount in the year, Social Security will temporarily withhold some of your benefits. So for every $2 that you earn over that limit, they withhold $1 in Social Security benefits. There's also a slightly different rule, a more generous rule for the year in which you reach your full retirement age, with a higher threshold or limit, and a more generous formula. But the important thing to know that I think many people don't realize is that If you do have your benefits withheld due to earnings, it's not a penalty and you don't lose that money forever. Because once you reach your full retirement age, Social Security will essentially recalculate your payments to give back to you what was withheld. And so in exchange, you get a higher monthly benefit going forward for the rest of your life.
Here's a related question, Elisa, that I think maybe you could answer. Can you explain the full retirement age issue and how that works?
Yeah, thank you for that. So the full retirement age in Social Security used to be 65, and I think a lot of people still have that number in their heads as kind of the default. But the full retirement age has been increasing to 67. And as I mentioned, it's based on the year you were born. For anybody born in 1960 and later, your full retirement age is 67. For folks born in earlier years, your full retirement age is a little bit lower, so it might be 66 and 6 months. And the way this works, or sort of what this means, really, taking a step back, you can claim Social Security from any age between 62 and 70. And for every month within that window that you delay claiming, your monthly benefit amount increases. Technically, the full retirement age is when you get essentially 100% of the full benefit that's calculated for you. But if you claim benefits before that age, you get a reduced monthly benefit amount. And if you delay after your full retirement age, you get an increased monthly benefit amount. So the full retirement age is an important number to know. And if you are thinking about claiming benefits and you're not sure what yours is, you can go to, I'll tell you some resources where you can go to find that. But it really is only one piece of the picture because, again, keep in mind that at any age, for any month between when you turn 62 and when you turn 70, that range is really the window when you should be looking at how much will your benefits increase if you delay claiming? And the benefit amount, that can be reduced or increased based on when you claim, that monthly benefit amount lasts for the rest of your life. And if you are the higher earner in a married couple, the rest of your spouse's life too. So if you are able to delay claiming, in many cases, we like to say it pays to wait. That's not going to be the right answer for every situation. This is a very personal decision. So I mentioned resources. You can go to our main Social Security page, which again is aarp.org/social security. And there's a lot of good information there about the full retirement age, other things to think about when you're claiming benefits. So that's a great place to start in looking for more info.
Great, thank you. I know it's just 2 minutes until we conclude, so I'm sorry we didn't have time for more questions, but if anyone does have any additional questions, please just send us a message on our Facebook page, or you can send me an email at this email address, and we'll make sure that your questions get answered. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Al Campos to close us out. Al?
So much, Kelly, and thank you to the terrific speakers we have tonight. What an excellent webinar and presentation. And thank you to everyone who joined us today. We're thrilled to have had nearly 1,000 educators participate in this important discussion about Social Security. We know this program is vital to your financial security, and we hope today's webinar gave you helpful insights and tools, resources that you can use in your Social Security journey. Remember, AARP and NRTA aren't just national organizations. We're active in your local communities. If you scan the QR code on your screen now, you can access your local AARP page for information, events, and resources relevant to where you live. You'll also see on this slide all the data from today's session. It'll take you directly to information about Social Security, research from AARP, NERS, and ways that you can take action on Social Security. Remember, education is crucial on the issue of Social Security. And finally, please make sure that you've confirmed your email address with AARP so that we can send you all the information that you would need on Social Security and many other topics of importance to AARP. We love to keep you informed about future events and resources for educators. NRTA is working hard to tailor events for educators in the communities in which you live. And on behalf of AARP and NRTA, thank you for your time, thank you for your engagement, and most importantly, for everything that you do to educate, inspire, and keep our nation's children educated and informed. Have a wonderful evening, everyone, and we thank you for everything that you do.